Well, hi, everybody. I'm Don Stewart, and welcome to our second edition of Breaking News of this Tuesday, the 15th day of April, 2025. And in the news, we have a supposed clarification from Steve Witkoff about what he's planning to do in the negotiations with Iran. And what he does, he makes the ambiguous still even more ambiguous, as we will see. Now, there's more news in the Temple Mount today, and we always do a story on the Temple Mount when it gets in the news, and it's very interesting, this one we're going to look at. The United States also makes an announcement about its troops in Syria, which is rather surprising to Israel. And finally, speaking of Israel, the Prime Minister Netanyahu today, he visited Gaza, made some powerful statements about Israel's plan for Hamas. So let's look at the headlines. First, from the Jerusalem Post, Iran must stop and eliminate enrichment, weaponization programs, of Steve Witkoff. It is imperative for the world that we create a tough, fair deal that will endure. And that is what President Trump has asked me to do, Witkoff stated today. Iran needs to end its uranium enrichment and abolish its weapons program if it wants to achieve a diplomatic agreement. This is from White House Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. He said today, Tuesday, any final arrangement must set a framework for peace, stability, and prosperity in the Middle East, meaning that Iran must stop and eliminate its nuclear enrichment and weaponization program, Witkoff wrote in the X Twitter post. It's X now, formerly Twitter. Now, notice a few things here. He is still talking about deals, not about eliminating once and for all Iran's nuclear program, not about destroying it, obliterating it. No, talking about making a deal first and foremost. That's still on the docket. Number two, we asked the question, what did Witkoff mean by saying Iran must stop and eliminate its nuclear enrichment and weaponization program? It makes things all the more ambiguous. To stop a program is not enough. Certainly, if Iran stopped the nuclear enrichment, that would certainly not be enough because they've already got things ready to make a bomb. To completely eliminate the program and destroy what has already been created is the only option. But he seems to give two different options there. It's very unclear. Now, there would be no need for ongoing verification that he talks about if the program and all its aspects have been completely eliminated. In addition, there must be measures put into place that would not allow Iran to ever try to start up the program again. This is the only suitable plan of action, but does not seem to be what Trump and Witkoff have in mind at this time. And it is very disconcerting and very disturbing to a lot of people out there because it seems unclear that we keep talking about making a deal. And Trump the other day said it's got a real easy deal to make. Well, you can't make a deal with Iran. Sorry, they do not keep their side of the deal. They never have. They never will. There's no way to verify it. As much as you say, we'll put this in place and that in place to verify it, they're very good at cheating. And so many countries, administrations over the years have found that out, never kept their promise, and they never will. So, again, this is rather unseemly what he just said. There is another story I was going to do earlier before this story came out. Now it was from Virtual Jerusalem about across the board how people are complaining that Witkoff is not only, negotiating with Iran, also with Hamas, also with Russia, and he's seemingly incompetent on all three of them. There's people on all sides, whether it's, Ukraine, Russia, the dealings he has with Russia, the dealings he's had with Hamas and the hostages, and now, of course, Iran, that the man is completely out of his league. Yet he's been placed there, so it's a real head scratcher. So let's keep our eye on that. Now we have three other stories that have an awful lot to do with last day's Bible prophecy. Let's get to them. Here's the second story. Report in a first, police allowed a group of 180 Jews to ascend the Temple Mount. Police today allowed a group of some 180 Jews to ascend the Temple Mount, and that's a first, according to the far leftist Israeli website Haaretz. Groups are usually smaller, around 30 at a time. Now, this is like 6 times as large. The newspaper notes that the move joins a broader departure from the traditional status quo at the Temple Mount in recent years, which has seen authorities allow previously forbidden Jewish worship at the site. Police tell Haaretz they secured visits to the Temple Mount as usual in accordance with visitation rules and the number of visitors. The number of people allowed in each group, we're told, is determined by various circumstances, including the overall number of visitors at the site, and in particular, police's ability to secure and maintain order in the situation. Now, again, just to make it clear, because there's so many misconceptions about the Temple Mount, there is a sacred building on the Temple Mount, but it's not the golden dome that you see in the middle. That's a shrine. That's the Dome of the Rock shrine. The sacred building is the one on the far southern side. It's an old gray building with a gray dome called Al-Aqsa Mosque. It is the only, it's always been the only sacred building. However, over the past about 20 years or so, what happened was that the Muslims decided to make the entire Temple Mount a mosque, and that includes not only the Al-Aqsa, but also the Dome of the Rock, and even the Western Wall, the Wailing Wall, is part, they say, of the compound that is sacred to Islam, which is there's nothing in the Quran about the Dome, about the Al-Aqsa Mosque or anything like that. It's only that something happened in the 19th century. But be that as it may, it is the place where many events will take place in the future, which will, usher in the second coming of Jesus Christ. We know that a third temple will be built on the Temple Mount, usher in these events. Now, for a full explanation, we have dealt with this fully in our book, The Jews, Jerusalem, and the Coming Temple, along with our book, 25 Signs Are Near the End. Sign number 8 are preparations being made to build a third temple. So if you're interested in this subject, go to our website, Educating Our World, and download the books. They're all free. They're under the heading of Bible prophecy, and you'll get a very thorough education on what's going on there on the Temple Mount and what will take place according to Scripture and why it is so important. That's why we say Israel is God's clock. The hour hand is the nation of Israel. The minute hand is the city of Jerusalem. But the second hand is the Temple Mount, because that's where the action's going to be. All right. Now, headline number 3. This is not good for Israel. U.S. tells Israel will begin withdrawing troops from Syria within 2 months. This is from Ynet. It's the first report after Trump expressed empathy for Erdogan. Remember, he said he likes Erdogan during his visit with Netanyahu. Ynet News has learned that Washington announced U.S. forces in Syria will begin a phased withdrawal within 2 months. In other words, the U.S. forces in Syria will leave in 2 months, a phased withdrawal, and Israel is warning of the consequences in trying to prevent the move amid fears that Turkey will take over more strategic assets in the new Syria. U.S. defense officials have informed their Israeli counterparts that U.S. plans to begin this phased withdrawal within 2 months, according to information obtained today, as the story says. Despite previous Israeli efforts to prevent such a move, Washington has made it clear those efforts were unsuccessful. Still, Israeli defense officials are not giving up and continue to press the Trump administration to reconsider. Interesting, the article says the Biden administration. Someone needs to update these articles here. The planned withdrawal comes as no surprise. Former President Donald Trump, now back in office, I'm glad they got that right, had long promised to pull U.S. troops out of the region under his administration's isolationist doctrine, influenced in part by Vice President J.D. Vance. Now, Trump is seen by many in Israel and many others as an isolationist, America first, America only, and the rest of the world were not the world's policeman. In fact, he made it clear, he said, I'm not the president of the world, I'm the president of the United States. I'm going to do what's best for the United States, and that's fair enough. But we are the only superpower, the real powerful superpower, at least we have been as far as the world's concerned. So again, the planned withdrawal comes as no surprise. Now here it goes. This is not our war, Trump has stated repeatedly, and the Pentagon has been preparing for the move for some time. Washington is now transitioning into the operational phase with regular updates being shared with Israeli defense officials. In discussions between the parties, Israeli representatives have expressed serious concerns about the potential consequences. All right, now, why is this important with last day's Bible prophecy? Well, this is consistent with what we should eventually expect from the biblical picture of the Middle East in the last days. Namely, the U.S. is conspicuous by its absence. Now, we're not there yet, but this is where it's going. We are not a player in last days Bible prophecy, and the fact that we're moving out of the Middle East more and more, this is consistent with what we expect to see down the line. Furthermore, Turkey will now have the opportunity to be much more influential in the area. And as we read Ezekiel 38 and 39, particularly chapter 38, we see Gomer, Beth Togarmah, which are ancient names of modern Turkey, being front and center alongside Iran under the leadership of Russia in this last days invasion of Israel. And so we're not surprised by something like this. If you're not familiar with this situation, Again, we have a book on the subject, is the Ezekiel 38:39 invasion. It's also a free download, as all of our books are from Educating Our World, our website. And of course, 25 signs, we're near the end. Signs 9 through 11 deal with this in some detail. So again, this is something we expect to happen. The U.S. pulling back, Turkey moving forward. And so exactly it's happening. As we said, Iran will be pulled back, its military prowess in the future. And Russia, of course, will come to the forefront as the leader of the group that will invade Israel at the time of the end. All right, finally, headline number 4. Prime Minister Netanyahu visited Gaza today, and he said Hamas will suffer more and more blows. He said this earlier to a visit of the northern strip with the IDF troops. We insist that it releases our hostages. We insist on achieving all of our war aims, Netanyahu told assembled soldiers as drones flew overhead. Holding a printout of a post by Iran's supreme leader Ali Khamenei, Netanyahu said it was again calling for Israel's destruction. He is doing this during negotiations with the Americans, Netanyahu said. First round of nuclear talks between the U.S. and Iran began last week in Oman, a process which Israel is extremely wary of, and wary they should be with what's been going on so far, especially when you have an incompetent like Witkoff doing it. Standing alongside Netanyahu, Defense Minister Israel Katz said Israel will never allow Hamas to threaten our communities and our citizens, and therefore the operation that is currently taking place is pressuring Hamas to first release the hostages. The more it persists in its refusal, the more we will intensify the blows it will suffer until it is defeated and all the hostages are returned. All right, so to sum up our 4 stories, stories 2, 3, and 4 are exactly what the scriptures predict about the last days. Namely, the Israelis will eventually not only worship on the Temple Mount, they'll build a 3rd temple there. Number 2, the U.S. will be conspicuous by its absence at the time of the end as Turkey moves to the forefront. We're seeing that. And number 3, Hamas will not have any future rulership or military power in Gaza, because when Israel gets invaded by Russia in the last days with Iran and Turkey in tow as surrogates there, they have no worry about that happening beforehand, because there's no problem in the south in Gaza and no problem in the north with Lebanon or Hezbollah, because they were past memories. And so we're seeing that go right according to schedule. Now, as far as Iran is concerned, this is still a really confusing situation. Any deal that Iran would agree to would be completely insufficient. The only option that makes any sense is the complete destruction of their program. Will this happen? And again, we must wait and see. So day to day, it's back and forth, but we'll keep you posted. I'm Don Stewart. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, as always, may the Lord richly, richly bless.